true to say that everything is a process, that we should grasp the world as a lot of processes rather than things. Now, this is an interesting insight, but can't be strictly correct. Firstly, if we want to say we grasp things as processes, we really mean that we have to grasp them with a narrative. So, for example, if you know something's a process, it means that you have a existing state, and that's different from the state that will happen a bit afterwards. But of course, a process isn't just two different states. It's the fact that one turns into the other. So to conceive something as a process is to have a little narrative, at least a little narrative, about what it is. Now, so you could say that there are two ways you can grasp the world. One is with narratives and the other with concepts. And there's been a lot of discussion over the years about the differences between these two ways of grasping the world. But on closer examination, it turns out that no concept is meaningful outside of, separately from the story about how it came about, how it was originated, or how you come to use it. And no narrative can make any sense at all apart from the concepts which make up the events and characters of the story. So what we have is two forms of knowledge, narrative and concept, through which we can grasp the world. And you can't have one or the other. They must be together. Okay. But the idea of grasping things as processes, let's just say in terms of narratives, obviously has a certain attraction. It seems to be a deeper way of understanding things than as simply things, right? But it's not, this has problems, right? Because it's not enough to say, oh, here's this thing, but I'll tell you, here's the story of how it came about. Here's the process of which it's a part. Because just a history, if you like, one thing after another, that's not a process. It's not any, there's no meaning attached to that. It's just, it could be an accident, right? So the question is, how do you grasp the meaning of a narrative, a story, a process of development, a coming into being of a state? Now, the first thing about it is that somewhere back towards the beginning of the story, there'll be a point at which the idea suddenly becomes relevant because it solves some problem. An idea often is there, generally is there already, before some circumstance comes about when that concept is needed, right? And then it becomes a solution to the problem. Now, that will happen when the concept sort of suddenly becomes useful and it becomes a solution to a problem. And it's grasping that concept as a solution to a problem, which is what gives meaning to the narrative that goes through that conjuncture. But also, it's important to know that when that situation occurs, when the concept becomes relevant as a solution to a problem, it's often unclear. And it's in the course of the unfolding of the narrative, the time doing its work, that the truth comes out, and the real nature of the context which made that solution a solution to that problem, and the real nature of the problem becomes clear. Now, that's not enough, because to concretely understand something, it's not enough to rely on theories Okay, if you have a theory and it's well established, there are different concepts within that theory that have their meaning as a part of it. But for important concepts which sort of found whole approaches to the world, whole sciences and views, whole situations and so on, it can't rely on some theory. It's an infinite regression. You need to find that visceral relation which ordinary, everyday, subjective consciousness can grasp. So, for example, you may say that a commodity is a unity of two kinds of value, use value and exchange value. But that's so technical. You can't really get a handle on what's being talked about there. But if you say a commodity is something that's only useful to you to exchange for something else, anyone can understand that. That's an experience which someone with any human contact in the world understands. That's a commodity, right? You can then go on to explain the contradictory nature of that. And it's that contradiction that a thing is both an exchange value that requires a certain effort of society to produce it, and a use value that it meets a certain concrete need. The contradiction between that and the values, types of value attached to each, which drives the development, which shifts the resources of a society around to focus on what its needs are. Likewise, when Vygotsky identified the word meaning as the key unit of analysis for the understanding of the intellect, word meaning is a clearly understood concept, right? And he was able then, through analysis, to show it's both communication and understanding. It's both sound and meaning, thereby bringing out the contradictory entities that are essentially part of the unit, which have their own sources of movement and directory, and therefore a contradictory that then gives you the dynamic and of the process which is intellectual development. Okay, so this idea of a concrete something, a unit of analysis, which is the way of grasping a process as a thing, and as a thing which is internally contradictory, which therefore explains and makes comprehensible the development.